And I don't know. Hey, what's
Hey,
going on, everyone? Dave's supposed to be here with us. Oh, there he is. There's Dave. We got him. How
Hey
you
guys,
doing? Hey, how are you?
good. How you
Big
doing?
Dave, how you doing, man?
Good. How
So
are you,
nice to
Fresh
see you.
Pondo? Good to see you.
Right on. We got a bunch of people in the house. We got to acknowledge these folks. They've been chatting back and forth for a while here. We got Braidwood in. We've got Zuperplex. We've got, let's see, I know we got Lance Chafin, and we've got Tracy Rothmeyers, and I did see, let's see who else I saw up here. Super Lance Chafin, Tracy Rothmeyers. Oh yes, our old standby here, John
John
Collins.
Collins.
How you doing, buddy? Apparently, there's a drink named after John Collins, and it's not a Tom Collins. It's the what's the difference? Tell us what's the
Well, the way I
difference.
remember it is think of the old war movies. All the old war movies are called the English are called Tommies. So gin is a Tom Collins, but a whiskey drink is a John Collins. So think of when Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah. A John Collins is a whiskey Collins.
Right. Okay, well that is awesome. All right, well let's get started here. You know what? I want to start with this question.
Okay.
Um, what is your most memorable decade of the 80s, of the 70s, 80s, and 90s? Which one do you think you had the most impact on you
The
guys
80s.
personally? This is kind of an open forum discussion. I don't really have I don't really have a format here. I'm gonna let everybody kind of you know lead the discussion here. But tell me, what was the biggest impact and why? Why? Out of
Okay.
the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Go ahead. Let's go ahead. Thrash Ponda. We'll just work
Oh,
that way. Yeah.
I will start. It had to have been the 80s for me. It was the decade I graduated high school. It was the decade I started college.
Uh-huh.
It was a decade I got my first real job.
Mm-hmm.
So I got my first like taste of independence. I had my own money, could make my own financial decisions. The music was great. I had some great friends. Movies were awesome. I'm a movie buff. Movies were wonderful at that time.
Right.
And I made a whole bunch of new friends when I went off to college. It was really my decade. Reagan
Mm.
was in the White House. What
We
could be wrong?
we were all happy, right? You know, those trickle down economics. That was wonderful. Keeping the rich folk rich. That was the best. That was the best time.
I
Yes.
intended to be rich one day.
Did you?
So Reagan made sense to me.
That's
Things didn't
good.
work out, but
What about you, Dave? What was your favorite decade? You're on mute, my friend.
There we go. I'm going to go with the 80s as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of, Thrash mentioned, I think he mentioned all three of the trifecta music, movies, and TV were really kind of clicking for him in the 80s. For me, it's 2 out of 3 ain't bad, to coin a phrase from Mr. Meatloaf. Um, Music and movies in the 80s were just, oh, I mean, some of the other things you mentioned, Thrash, I mean, it was when I really had my first real job and, went to graduated from high school, went to college, served an LDS mission for a couple of years. So there was a lot going on for me. But if we're talking about pop culture, music, I just can't think of a decade that I love more than the 80s for music. And movies, even today, many of movies that are current releases still seem inspired by what happened, what was new and novel in the 80s. Now, television, maybe it's just that I was a little TV bug, always watching TV when I was a little bit younger. That the 70s is kind of, I think, probably my favorite era for television, as I think about
Mm.
the sitcoms and a lot of shows that you can still catch on what, Tubi and Pluto and MeTV today, but
Right.
in the 80s, definitely the 80s for music and movies,
Movies and music and movies, and but television, it's the 70s for you, huh?
for sure.
Let's see what some of these other people have to say. Flick Snacks and Nick Knacks. Hey, we got to do another program here again soon, brother. Either on your channel or mine. Says, hey. Let's see. Lance Chafin says the 70s were great. I was born in the 70s. Well, then that was a great decade if you were born in the 70s. Let's see. LOL. No one will say the 90s. I'm going to chime in here for a minute. You might be surprised. 70s as well. And then I'm interested in hearing. Let's see. Flix says movies 70s, music 80s, television 90s. Could be. That's a really good observation there. I love the 80s. Cindy D, I love the 80s. I love the 80s too. I have to tell you personally, I'm torn. And the reason why I'm torn is I'm torn between the 80s and 90s. Now I was born in 70s, the early 70s. And so I was just kind of a little kid then, but it had a big impact on me for sure. But as far as like me kind of coming to myself, it was the 80s. I mean, for sure, the 80s was a big deal for me for movies. Of course, you had Star Wars happening in the 70s, the first one in the 70s, but then 1980 was The Empire Strikes Back, which is my favorite of the Star Wars films. But you know what? I mean, I straddle between 80s and 90s, guys, because 90s for me was the decade of music for me, which is a huge, 80s and 90s, but 90s is where I really found myself in music. And the television shows in the 90s as well. But boy, movies, I'd say across the board. Let's see here. Let's see this. Oh, go ahead. Thrash Pondo's my reader. You should be reading
John
these.
Cullen says, hey, Dave, could you tell the YouTube overlords to please monetize these two wonderful gentlemen's channels?
I
don't know if Dave has control over that. Go ahead, Dave. I'm not going to respond for you.
Yeah, sure. I'll let him know.
Oh, thank you, Dave.
Didn't know that. Let's see. 70s music. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Quite all right. Superbook says 70s music had rhythm and blues music like the Stylistics.
The Stylistics. I don't remember that band. Anybody else?
They were one of those bands that had several incarnations. I believe they were also known as Blue Magic. If I remember correctly, one of their biggest hits was that song "Rubber Band Man."
Oh, okay. All right.
Hey, y'all, pay yourself for the Rubber Band Man. Oh, and Mr. Flickstack says grunge. So he's a '90s listener, I can tell.
Well, let's go through this. I got a question that's inspired by that last. If you could pick in the decades, the 70s, like your top in the 70s, like what would be your top 3 favorite bands of the 70s? And they could have more in the 80s and 90s too, but just like like their heyday was the 70s, and maybe even they were in the 60s. Dave, go ahead. If you could pick up your top band or your top 3 bands of the 70s.
Oh, yeah. So not too hard for me. They would be in no particular order. Meatloaf,
okay,
which I believe Bat Out of Hell came out in 77. So it's going to be the second half of the 70s, by the way.
Yeah.
And there's some bands I'm not going to mention, like the Eagles, of course, America. There's a lot of bands that were really popular. But for me, the 3 that really resonated with me were Meatloaf. And of course, Bat Out of Hell was, what is it? Like still in the top 5 all-time selling albums. And then I also loved the Boomtown Rats, which is a UK band that came out of the pop punk explosion that occurred there. They pretended to be punkers like the Sex Pistols, but they really weren't. They just turned out to be a really good R&B blues band, and most folks over here in the U.S. know them best for their one hit in the U.S., I Don't Like Mondays, which is not in any way indicative of their style of music. It was very much kind of that style, which I think it's, for the most part, piano playing with a little bit of orchestra in the background. Not a lot going on there really from the band. But the interesting thing about that band was they achieved their greatest amount of fame with a producer named Robert John Mutt Lang. If any of you know who Mutt Lang is, he was the producer that helped AC/DC hit their highest level of fame. Then moved on to Def Leppard. And then after the Boomtown Rats, which he produced 3 albums by the Boomtown Rats, the first 3, he then moved over to country music later on and decided to marry the artist as well. That's Shania Twain. And so he's just a hit maker. Mutt Lang is amazing. Third band would be the Tubes. First album, their debut album with What Do You Want? What Do You Want from Life? White Punks on Dope, Mondo Bondage came out in 1975. And they released, although their biggest hits were in the 80s with She's a Beauty, Don't Want to Wait Anymore, Talk to You Later, they released a string of eclectic albums, all of them dismal failures, really, from a Billboard chart sales perspective, for A&M Records over the course of the mid to late 70s that are just pure, absolute genius. And if anyone has had the pleasure of seeing the Tubes live, it's a huge theatrical experience. It's one of those things you'll never forget for the rest of your life. So there you go, my 3.
Let's before you answer, let's get some comments in here. Let's see, we got
Superplex, the Bee Gees. That's good. Also, ABBA, anyone? One Night at Waterloo.
Let's see.
Cindy D. I just missed Cindy D. Sorry, Cindy. Superplex, Cindy D. All of the Temptations.
I think that was a comment back.
Flick Snack says Fleetwood Mac, Led Zeppelin, and if I can't count the Beatles, may be more 60s, then I choose Aerosmith. Aerosmith was something much better in 70s than 80s. I will certainly concur with you there as far as Aerosmith's de-evolution.
Oh man, we're gonna fight here. Let's see here.
No, they put out some good stuff in the 80s, but 70s Aerosmith is gooder. John Collins. For all 3, what is your most favorite underrated song by a popular artist? For me, it is Barry Osmond's "Meet Me in Montana."
Well, that's a good one. Underrated song, and then we got to get this in here.
Greetings from South Carolina, Daily Dan. Good to see you, man.
That's a tough question. Before we go on to your 3, does anyone want to give a stab at that underrated song from a famous band? In
the 70s specifically, or at any time?
I'd say any time.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is John's off by a decade there. Meet Me in Montana came out in 85, I think. Written by Dan Sills. I believe written by Paul Davis, sung with, it's a duet with Dan Sills. And I don't know if it's fair to call it underrated. I think it was a #1 hit on the country charts. Love Marie Osmond, John. You know I'm a big fan of the Osmonds. Almost mentioned them in my favorite 70s bands, but they're not quite as cool and hip as the other bands I mentioned.
If there's one thing I will never forgive my wife for, I was in Vegas when they were doing their farewell tour, and we could have seen them for a paltry $300. And Mom was like, "No, that's too much money." And I'm like,
"I'm with your wife."
But it was the last chance to
scratch Mondo.
But it was the last chance.
I bet you there's a recording of it here on YouTube. Just watch it on YouTube.
Just watch it. Turn out the lights and put it on.
I'll tell my wife you have her back, Dave. That goes a long way. So, go ahead there, Ian.
Oh, I was going to say this is going to be 90s, even more kind of mid late 90s, and that is Marcy Playground. Pretty much anything by Marcy Playground. They had the one hit, Sex and Candy, which really, in my opinion, did not represent what that band was about. Didn't represent what that band was about. They're a tad bit of a Nirvana ripoff, especially if you get to their 3rd album. I don't know if you get to their 3rd album, they really start sounding way more like Nirvana. But anything off that first album was really good. I mean, seriously, and people just they just know the one song. And so I would say every other song off of the first and the second album, Shapeshifter, was some really, really, really good stuff. Their third album, like I said, was like, I mean, it almost just sounded like a Nirvana ripoff, but no.
I'll
Go
have
ahead.
to go with Victoria.
You got to pull your headphone down when you're talking, though.
Oh,
You got to pull
I'm
your
sorry.
headphone
Is that
down.
better?
Yeah, it's way
Can
better.
you hear me? I'd go with Victoria by the Kinks. Kinks, wonderful band, been around forever, but the only thing the radio ever plays by them is Lola. And they had some absolutely amazing stuff over the decades. And Victoria is one of my favorite cuts by them. And for some reason, the radio never plays it. So I think that song was underrated.
You know what? We're coming up on the holiday season, so it's time to pull out your album with Father Christmas on it.
Give me some money.
That'll be a good one.
It sure is. It sure is.
While you're talking there, Thrash Pondo, give us your 3 from the 70s.
Okay, my 3. Now, I should qualify. There were some amazing bands in the 70s I didn't discover until later.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to make my 3 selections bands I was actually listening to in the 70s.
Okay.
And I'm going to start with the most influential to me when I was a very young kid, Kiss. They'd have to be number 1. They were the first band after the Beatles where I could name all 4 members. They were that influential with me. They were huge. They were the 70s to me. As a boy from New England, I have to add Boston. I loved Boston. They even mentioned Hyannis at one point. Dancing in the streets of Hyannis. And rounding up the top 3 of the 70s, I got to go with Blue Oyster Cult.
Oh, Blue Oyster Cult. Oh, yeah.
Hey,
for sure.
Ian?
Yeah.
Can I just change my list to Robert's list?
Yeah, for sure. He's gonna blow us all away here. Let's before I chime in myself.
Praise from Caesar.
Let's get some
Trace Ross Myers. Night Ranger was great. Weren't they more of an 80s band though?
They were, but I no doubt about it. I've seen Night Ranger probably 10 times. I love them. They're great.
Yeah. Night Ranger is good. Sister Christian. They're the ones that did Sister Christian.
Yeah,
that was their biggest hit, I believe.
Much to their chagrin, I think they're tired of playing that one. But yeah,
it's like just play that song so we can leave. They
getting back to underrated songs. Look at Warrant. All they'll ever be known for is Cherry Pie, and he made that song with a gun to his head. His producer's like, "Look, the label wants a snappy, fun song that all the fraternity brothers will sing at their beer blasts." And he basically it was almost like Hound Dog. He wrote it, I think, on like a brown paper bag in about 20 minutes, and it made umpteen Brazilian dollars. Whereas Uncle Tom's Cabin, I think, is one of the best sounds of the 80s. So, sometimes there's just no justice in the music world.
Yeah, so very true. We have no taste as a public.
We all have an opinion about that.
Several in some cases.
Warren was one of my least favorite bands ever.
But you know what? I do think Robert brings up a great point, and that Uncle Tom's Cabin is just a phenomenal piece of storytelling in song and musicianship. They were actually a band that, because of Cherry Pie, I'm afraid, a lot of people are quick to discount them.
Their album before that, though, was kind of rocketing up. Was it Down Boys?
That's where the Down Boys go. I don't think that was the name of the album, but yeah, the Down Boys was on this.
That's where I first heard of them. Was on that. It was probably on a late night version of Headbangers Ball. You had to watch Headbangers Ball and then stay up after the first hour and a half, after the first hour and a half, when they stopped playing all the hits, which were good, which I loved. But then after that, that's when you got some really cool stuff. Those are like started listening to like DAD and I don't know if you remember that band, or Bang Tango. Those are some real underground metal bands that just didn't get as much airplay as they should have. And like you said, Thrash Pondo, when you said, hey, some of these bands were bands that I didn't know. I know now, but I didn't know then. And so my list would be different if I was then than now. But now, let me just say, I would have to say One of them would be Black Sabbath. I mean, they're just one of the best bands. I think probably one of the more influential bands to especially that considered to be the godfather of heavy metal. Although that title does go also to Led Zeppelin, but Led Zeppelin rejects it. By the way, they're like, I don't want anything to do with heavy metal. They're kind of stuck up when it comes to that. So, but Black Sabbath would be one of them, and I would have to say the Ramones would be another one. The Ramones, and for me, there's just such a place in my heart for Pink Floyd. I mean, really, there's a place in my heart. I mean, I just have to say that. A place in my heart for Pink Floyd. Okay.
Well, speaking of the Boomtown Rats, because if you've seen The Wall, then you'd know that the lead singer of the Boomtown Rats, Bob Geldof, plays Pink in the feature film.
Yeah,
little synchronicity there.
He actually even there's one scene in the movie where he actually gets to sing the part of the soundtrack. So you hear a little bit of Bob Geldof. I can't remember the name of the song, but it's a small piece. But for the most part, it's a re-recording by the original artist. But there is a moment where he sings as well.
I didn't
Back
know
Against
that.
the Wall, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, really? He sings. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll have to look that up because I was a huge fan.
He's giving a speech, and he actually he does it as a spoken word rendition of the song.
Yeah. You'll only find that in the movie soundtrack. The original version doesn't have that.
Yeah. I was a big fan of both. Wasn't the movie 80s though? Was it 80s? Mm-hmm. The movie?
It was
80.
Yeah.
1980.
And the album though was like 79 or something like that. 78, 79.
That sounds about right. I don't have the facts in front of me, but that does sound a bit right.
It's the only movie I ever went to that I tell you I was high by the time the movie was over, and I didn't smoke anything. I had no actual drugs on me, and yet I remember as the first few trailers came up on the screen, as we were preparing for it, you could just see the smoke all just kind of rising from the theater seats. And yeah, the fumes got me on that one. And you know what? Kind of glad they did.
But then you understand the psychedelic movement, right? Or the psychedelic bands. I have a story to tell, but back before my BC days, I call it BC, before Christ. I went on a really bad trip listening to The Wall. I was on acid, and I was on 2 different types of acid, and I just went nuts. I never touched acid again after that. But we used to, drop acid and watch The Wall or listen to it or whatever. It was our favorite thing.
You really don't need it too much. You don't need too much to make The Wall quite the trip anyway.
Oh man, it was bad. I saw bugs pouring out of my bed and stuff, and I was freaking out, and saw skulls and crossbones across my wall. And
yikes.
I don't know, probably not too many people have. I don't know if too many people here, because it's kind of more of a wholesome show. I'm kind of showing like kind of a past image of myself that was, not terribly flattering, but I do have that in my
Let's
past.
keep it wholesome. Don't do drugs, people.
Yes, learn from me. Learn from me.
Trust me on this one.
All right, let's see here. Let's get some comments going. Let's see.
Tracy Ross Myers, too many bands and songs for me to mention laugh out loud.
Yes.
It is a tough choice, the agony of choice. Lance Chafin, Motley Crue, Poison, Quiet Riot.
Well, that's got to be an 80s thing.
They are.
It has to be.
Yep.
Yeah.
At least 2 of those are 80s.
Again, to the point that, the 80s was a marvelous year or decade for music.
Yeah.
Across the board in pretty much all subgenres of music.
Yep.
Do you guys have a favorite subgenre of music?
Ooh.
Or do you have a favorite genre?
No, I don't.
Ooh.
Here's a little bit of 80s trivia, though. Just one little piece of trivia that I found out the other day. I think I may do a video on this. 1984, there were only, for the entire year, 5 number 1 albums.
5
5
number 1
number
album.
1 albums. That's it.
Really?
And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Michael Jackson's Thriller was number 1 forever and ever. But here's the irony. 1984 by Van Halen, the album named after the year, only ever made it to number 2.
Oh man,
That's crazy.
Oh.
Wow.
And what kept it out of it was Eddie Van Halen playing Beat It.
Oh really? Oh well, wow.
Yeah, he was basically competing against himself because that was one of the all-time
Eddie
great solos in
competing
Beat It.
against Eddie.
Wow. You have to do a post on this, Dave. That fact in and of itself.
That's going on the Retro Music Memories channel in the next week or so.
Yeah. Oh, I had another fact too that I wanted to bring up because I forgot, and I was going to say it back when we were talking about the Boomtown Rats. The lead singer of the Boomtown Rats adopted the daughter of
Michael
Hutchins. Yeah, the lead
after he
singer.
committed suicide.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, his wife had left. Bob Geldof's wife left him for Michael Hutchins, and they had a child. And then Michael committed suicide, and then Paula Yates, the woman who had been both married to Bob or at least with Michael, she committed suicide as well, leaving this child an orphan. And kudos to Bob. I think most of us would do the right thing in that situation, but it doesn't sound like it was ever a question. He just immediately brought her into his family. And while she wasn't his child in any way by blood, she was his child in many ways from just spiritually. And he's taken care of her since.
Well, that's very
that's a sad and heartwarming.
Yeah, there's been a lot of tragedy for Geldof in his life. He's had a daughter who was a huge star over there, overdose as well.
Really? Oh,
bad news. All right, we're gonna move on. I like this theme, and we're gonna move on. And this is gonna be our lead into. If the chats go by kind of quick, so it's hard to understand for me. And I know Dave has talked about this too. It's hard to actually pay attention to what everybody's saying and try to read comments and then go back and try to find them. So if I miss some, please forgive me. I'm doing the best I can.
Ian,
yeah,
you did put up John's question though, and so let me quickly I mentioned one of my all-time favorite Christmas songs, which is "Father Christmas" by the Kinks. And Do They Know You? I think John mentioned that one of his favorites was "Do They Know It's Christmas?" Of course, that is one of my favorites as well because it's written by Bob Geldof along with Midge from Ultravox.
I don't know if I have an alternate favorite Christmas song. I don't know if I have that or not. I have to think of one. I like the classics. I got a whole album called Rock and Roll Christmas. I don't know. None of them stick out.
All-time favorite Christmas album? Charlie Brown Christmas.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I have a weakness for David Bowie and Bing Crosby's Little Drummer Boy.
Oh yeah, that's a good one too.
Great song.
Probably if people started talking about it more, it'd kick my memory in a little bit. I know U2 did a Christmas song, so
it did.
Yeah, they did. U2 did a Christmas album, didn't they?
I'm not familiar with it.
Let's see.
I believe it, but I'm not familiar with it.
U2 Christmas song. They were on a very special Christmas, and it was a cover of "Baby Please Come Home."
Yeah.
Shall I do Flick's next comment here? Oh, yes, if you wonder why I keep zooming in, I'm doing this through my phone, and so that I can read it, I have to get in close to actually read the lettering. And Flick Zach said, I'll come in again. And Flick Snacks says, top 3 from the 80s: Anthrax, Skid Row, Golden Earring.
I've never heard of Golden Earring. I've heard of Anthrax.
Radar Love. You've never heard of Radar Love?
Or Twilight Zone. Help! I'm slipping into the Twilight Zone. Come on, Ian. Really?
Well, it's not ringing a bell. I'm sorry. I just.
Yeah, a couple great songs for sure. Flick Snacks has got some good taste in music.
Well, let's move it on into this into the 80s.
Okay,
Three
86.
bands from the 80s. If you had to choose, you're on this desert island stuff. You're on a desert island. You can through 3 bands from the 70s, 3 bands. You get everything they've made too. So, but you got to choose 3 bands, Dave. What would you choose? It's the 1980s. Well, I should say this. What was your favorite 3 bands then, and what are your favorite 3 bands now?
Yeah, that's tough because I was pretty darn loyal to the bands that I've already mentioned, but let me throw in a band that I think their debut album came out in '79, but I really got into them in the '80s, which is the Knack. Love the Knack, and really my heart broke for them as the inevitable backlash which was going to happen after having an album as huge as that debut album was. And they never actually recovered from it, but they released a ton of good albums during the 80s, and so love the Knack. Other bands that were big for me in the 80s, the Fix would have been a band that I've seen a handful of times that I loved.
These are excellent choices, Dave.
Yeah.
These are excellent choices.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a kind of a heavy metal, more metally band. Here's the funny thing about Kiss, Thrash. I loved Kiss in the 70s, but I probably listened to Kiss more in the 80s when they took off their masks. So we're talking about the Vinnie Vincent era and then the Bruce and Mark Kulick era where they were. So we're talking about Lick It Up was one of my all-time favorite albums. Animalize, Asylum. These are albums that for me are just it was Kiss giving the middle finger to everybody that had counted them out for dead. And they're back, and those were some phenomenal albums. Late 80s, some of that Crazy Nights was, I thought, a kind of a weak album, and I wasn't even a big fan of Hot in the Shade, although there's a couple of good tracks on that one. But the early Kiss, so the first half of the 80s, I thought they were awesome. One other band I'd mention, which also came out in the 70s. From your neck of the woods, Robert, was the Cars. And I love the Cars, and
Rico Kasich.
Yes, and so Shake It Up and Heartbeat City both came out in the Shake It Up, I think, was 82 or 83, and Heartbeat City came out in 84 or 85. Those 2 albums just were nonstop played in the Sunstrom home. Loved both of them, and was heartbroken when the band, after years and years, in I think 87, they did one last album. They've regrouped, they reformed, but and I'm drawing a blank on the name of that album, but it wasn't great, and clearly they just run out of steam, run out of gas. Maybe the Cars have.
Good way to put it.
Well played. Well,
let's get, before we get that, let's go to some of these comments here.
Super.
I just want to make sure I get everybody here.
Of course. Part of the game.
Let's see.
Flicksnack says, when the bullet hits the bone.
Twilight Zone.
And you were on your own when the bullet hits the bone. Very good. Brent Whitten says, golden earrings started in the 60s. He's right, they did. I didn't want to say anything, but yes. Lance Choffin, the Go-Go's, the Bangles, and Vixen.
All really good bands, choices. Huh? All really good choices.
Dilly Den Blog, you can't believe. I can't believe you don't know Golden Earring or Twilight Zone. OMG.
I probably would know it if I heard it.
You would know it if you heard it, Ian.
Yeah,
you would. I'm certain of it. Down, 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 down. Oh, Trey Thrust Myers, 80s Cure, Susie and the Banshees, and The Clash. All wonderful choices. Cindy D, wonderful Christmas time. So this is Christmas, and this Christmas by Donny Hathaway.
Great song. Great song.
Mr. 79 Man, hey, welcome to the party, Mr. 79.
How you doing, buddy?
Thrash, and Dave, great to see y'all. Great to see your icon, Mr. 79 Man. Thanks for joining us.
Let's see.
Alfred O'Darty, I saw Kiss on Midnight Special in 74, live in 75, stayed current with them through the Rock and Roll Over album, had every album up to that. And John Collins says, Dave, you mentioned the Knack. I'm sorry. Am I allowed to love the song My Sharona, even though the lyrics are very, very questionable? However, the beat, tempo, and hook are awesome.
Yes, you're allowed to love the song because, you know, we don't have to agree with everything that's mentioned lyrically in a song. Thank heavens. But you're right. The album, every song on that album is just expertly crafted pop music.
Yeah,
pop rock.
She just died not too long ago, actually. Cancer. She was only like 57 years old, I believe.
Who are we talking about?
Sharona, the actual Sharona.
Did Sharona Alpian die?
Yes, she died recently. I'd say within the last 4 or 5 years. Cindy D. You missed my early 80s bands. REO Speedwagon, Billy Squier, Loverboy, and Foreigner. I want to know what love is. Foreigner, awesome. Actually, they were all really good, but let me guess, you were about 13 in the 80s, right?
I want to know what love is. Yeah,
I want
great
you to.
Song. I can't say it. Okay, all right.
I was going to say the urge to say the lyrics is awesome. Oh, well, am I up? Wonderful.
Yeah, you're up, Thrash.
And I will recite these in no particular order.
Okay.
I got to go with U2. I just had them. REM, of course.
Oh, whew.
And I'm all I can think of is the album. I can't think of Paranoia. I'm drawing a blank here.
The Kinks,
Oh.
No? Paranoia?
No, not the Kinks.
They
were Photograph. I don't want.
Def Leppard.
Oh,
Thank you. I couldn't think of Def Leppard to save my life, even though they're one of my favorite bands of the 80s. Def Leppard.
Yeah. Well,
there's a band who's overcome some hardship.
High and Dry. That was there. Was that the one with the What was the one with?
It's not. No. It was. There was High and Dry.
Yeah.
But it's the big one. And then when you're thinking of is. Oh man!
Pyromania.
Pyromania.
I said Paranoia. I meant Pyromania.
Yeah.
Pyromania. Yeah, that was a good one. That was my favorite one.
The 80s were a long time ago.
yeah. For me, well, look, it's different now, and it's real. That would be the hardest decade for me to choose. Of course, I know Nirvana came out in the 80s, but I would really consider them a 90s band. That's when they exploded. Was Definitely. In the 90s.
They were the 90s sound.
And I was really into music back then, but my taste was different. So like if I had to choose now, it would be totally different. If it was back then, it would have been like Motley Crue and Ozzy Osbourne, and it would have been that would have been what I would have chosen, stuff like that. Probably now on there would definitely have to be the Pixies. Pixies is one of my all-time favorite bands ever. And REM, definitely have to choose REM. One of the only band I ever saw live, like big name band I saw live. I saw some clubs and stuff, but as far as like a big name band out there, I saw them live on their Monster tour, which was incredible, which I'm glad I went to go see because they didn't tour again for like 5 years or something like that. And I actually don't think they ever toured again with the complete band. I think that they broke up and they never toured again with the complete band. Didn't break up, but the drummer left. I should say that.
Didn't he fall ill? Didn't he have cancer or something?
He did not quit because of that.
Oh,
he quit because he just didn't want to do it anymore. They had the record that he was supposed to be on all made except for the drum part, and they were like, "Where is he?" And I think that his first name's Billy. He just said he couldn't do it. He just said he didn't want to do it anymore. He says, I'm done.
I guess what I was leading into was while he physically could do it, being ill kind of changed his outlook on life and what was important to him priority wise.
Oh,
I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Well, he was the one who he had brain surgery on one of their tours or something like that. They had postponed a lot of their stuff. But I think he played again on another album after that. That was because I remember when I went to the Monster tour, I was going to go earlier, and they had to postpone a bunch of shows. And when I was at the Monster tour, because they had postponed shows, somebody thought that I was in their seat. Some people came up and they brought some the security up, and they were going to throw me out of my seat. And I'm like, no, this is my ticket here. And they had tickets from, I guess they were trying to get in from earlier tickets, and there was a little bit of a dispute. So that was, are you looking it up, Dave?
Yeah, I'm apparently up in the night. I see nothing about him being ill or anything. It was just a decision that he made to leave.
Yeah, as I remember, because I saw some pretty extensive documentaries on it, he just didn't want to do it anymore. No. He was just done. Let's see. Gosh, this would be so hard. I mean, you two would come very close. I'd have to say INXS. INXS. It would be a toss up between INXS and The Cure. Boy, they both have some of my. INXS has been one of those bands. I have to say that INXS has been one of those bands that have been very good through the years, even though they weren't popular as people would say. Let's see. I'm going to spare the 90s here. What do we have? Any?
Can I just add one anecdote about REM?
Yes,
I love this one musically. I saw them in a little city outside of Boston called Worcester, and would have had to have been '88. And at the time, they were backed up by 10,000 Maniacs, and of course, at this time, Michael Stipe and Natalie Merchant were romantically involved. And in her set, when they did the campfire song, he came out and they sat on the stage like a couple and sang the song together, and it was the cutest thing in the world.
Oh, really?
I just wanted to mention this cute musical moment that I had with REM many years ago. It was just adorable.
Interesting. Well, that's a great story. That's a great, yeah. Of course, 10,000 Maniacs is great. But I mean, for me, Natalie Merchant was 10,000 Maniacs, and her solo career was good.
Lynn Chaffin says INXS. Cindy D, Def Leppard. Thanks, I was groping my mind, Cindy. Dear Tracy Roth Myers, I saw the Pixies front row center.
Cool.
Lance Chafin, Depeche Mode. I think if I had a fourth choice, it would have been Depeche Mode.
Yeah. There was a band here that tried to. They were called Bliss Deck Front, and we played with them a couple times. And I was a lead singer of a band here back in the 90s. Back in the 90s, me and the guitarist did not get along. Let me just say that. It was he had just the stupidest lyrics in the world. And I came in, I rewrote all. They had like another band, and then they got rid of their singer and got rid of their bassist, and me and my friend, we were best friends, and he was the bassist, and we went in, and there was a drummer and a guitar player, and he had written all these songs, and the singer had written some of them, and he had written some of the lyrics, and I just changed every one of them. He just was very upset about that. I'm like, I'm not singing these stupid lyrics. You got to get the heck out of here. These words are not coming across my lips. I'll make it. All right. I'm gonna change the format just a bit. Unless there's some questions here. I was gonna say let's not do 90s music. We kind of do music a little too much. This is supposed to be kind of encompassing everything. So let's do TV. If you had to choose your 3 favorite dramas, let's go dramas this time. From not sitcoms, but dramas from the 70s. What would they be? Let's start with you, Thrash Pondo.
Well, I must say, at the time, the 70s, I was a kid. I wasn't watching a lot of dramas. I was mostly watching sitcoms. Uh-huh. But if I had to pick dramas, I might have to bend the rule a little and go with ones that I started watching later. Well, one, of course, would have to be James at 15 or / James at 16. I started watching that, of course, in the 70s. Started with the TV movie. Kind of got hooked on it. Dallas. I did start watching Dallas, not until the early 80s, but that was a big 70s drama. And let's see, what else drama-wise was on in the 70s that I would have watched? Man from Atlantis. That was a science drama.
Yeah.
Maybe?
I mean,
Judges?
anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
I give
Yeah,
it
I
to.
count it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see what some of the people in the chat are saying.
Mannix, Streets of San Francisco, and Policewoman.
Mm.
John H. I loved James at 15/16 too. How could you not? Lance Kerwin was great. Alfred O'Darty says, was the Waltons considered drama?
For
I would
sure.
consider drama, yes.
For
yes,
sure.
And I think that fits very well. Certainly better than Man from Atlantis.
Yeah. All right, Dave, you're up. I almost called you Steve.
Okay. I always consider that quite the compliment when I'm
Right.
called Steve.
Our,
$6 Million Man,
oh yeah.
Ooh.
without a doubt. If I can think of one show in the 70s that for me was the most important, most pivotal, it was the $6 Million Man, and particularly the high drama episodes when he met Bigfoot and they went through that huge tunnel thing, and it was just crazy. And I don't want to give any spoilers out about Bigfoot, but just the mysteries of Bigfoot are solved for all of us.
That's really good.
I loved it. I was going to say Starsky and Hutch, but someone mentioned, Al Duarte mentioned the Waltons, and I probably watched more Waltons than Starsky and Hutch. Starsky and Hutch were cooler, but I probably watched, if I think about the 70s and that decade, there weren't many weeks I missed the Waltons, which was just, for me, a show that really was inspiring, because at the time I thought I was going to be a writer, and I loved the whole John Boy character and the fact that he was narrating it as if he was writing the stories of his family. So really resonated with me. And, of course, it just was one of those shows that you felt good about after you watched it, because there's this family that's just incredibly close and relying on each other to get through tough times. Last one would be a show that I think debuted in 78, a little science fiction opus called Battlestar Galactica.
Oh man, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's face facts. The 70s were a treasure trove for science fiction television.
Yeah.
They didn't last too long, but they were great.
Yeah.
And by the way, honorable mention has to go to Man from Atlantis. I loved Man from Atlantis. Great show.
Was that one with the guy that had
Patrick Duffy? Patrick Duffy
Duffy
played Mark Harris, who was a man who had amnesia, didn't really know, but we believed he was from the lost city of Atlantis. And he battled this guy named Victor Schubert, or Mr. Schubert, who was played by Victor Buono, who was also King Tut in Batman. So it was extra special for me.
Yeah, he was a recurring villain, and he was great.
Let's see what the comments have to say.
$6 Million Man all the way.
Yes, for sure.
John Collins, Columbo.
That's
I'm ashamed I didn't think of it.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Very good one. Brandwood Inn says, all of Knight Rider is the only drama I watched, mostly seasons 1 through 3.
Well, that would have been 80s.
It was. It's a great choice. High drama, for sure.
Oh, Tracy Rossmaya's Beretta.
Beretta.
It's what happens when one of the little rascals grows up, right?
Right.
Oh, the Daily Dan blog, Space 1999, more 70s sci-fi.
I haven't seen that one yet. It's on my Tubi right now, and I'm thinking of putting it on.
I understand
Check it out.
season 1 is much better than season 2. Season 2 is kind of a complete re-envisioning of the show, similar to what they did with Buck Rogers. But I haven't watched it either. And it's one of those where folks ask me to do videos on it, and I don't have a lot contextually to go with. I'm going to need to watch that show as well to understand it.
Yeah.
Oh, J1. I've always preferred the classic Battlestar Galactica over the remake.
You, me, and Dirk Benedict, J1.
Yeah. I've never even seen the remake. We've never even seen the remake.
I think I watched an episode or two. Wasn't bad. It just wasn't Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah. I hear that if you've never seen Battlestar Galactica, people really do like it, but I don't. I can't get past some of the stuff. I just like I put it on, but I have a friend who he's younger, about 10 years younger than me, so he never really did watch Battlestar Galactica, and he's always trying to get me to watch Battlestar Galactica because he's like, it's such a good show. It's such a good show, but of course he's not sitting there in his mind doing all the comparisons, So let's see. For me, so this was interesting. This will be interesting because this is going to be like, for me, like in the 70s when it was on. And believe it or not, one of the biggest things that I remember about the 70s, at least as far as I can remember, I could be messing my decades up. I know it bled into the 80s, but was the Rockford Files.
Definitely the 70s.
And even when I was a kid, I liked the Rockford Files. My grandfather was a big Rockford Files fan. And so we would sit and watch the Rockford Files. He would just watch it and I just sit there and watch it. And even though I was pretty young, I actually really super enjoyed it. And the Dukes of Hazzard. Good night.
Drama?
Man.
Come on. Drama?
I was going to say.
Is that not a drama?
More of an action comedy, I would say. But great show.
All right, well, I'll have to change it. Okay, so not Dukes of Hazzard. Then that was the $6 Million Man. That was on my list.
You know what? If I can say $6 Million Man, you can say Dukes of Hazzard.
Fair enough.
6 million. Well, yes. Well, Dukes of Hazzard, like I said, I've got some of my oldest memories go back to Dukes of Hazzard. I have so many memories about Dukes of Hazzard. It's just crazy. It was one of those things that came on Friday night, and I was allowed to stay up an extra hour because there was no school the next day, and I was little. I was like 5, 6 years old, something like that. So that was exciting for me. And then one of the times the next day, I think I told this story on your channel, Dave, but I'll tell it again here. I got this the first time I ever got grounded was because of the Dukes of Hazzard. I thought it was cool how they would slide across the top of the car, the General Lee, and so I was sliding across the floor, and the teacher thought I was crawling. The teacher reported because I wouldn't get off the floor. I just kept sliding across the floor. So the teacher called my grandmother, who I was staying with at the time, and said, your grandson won't stop crawling. So my grandmother, to punish me, said that I had to crawl on the floor for 1 hour, and I couldn't get up for 1 hour. So that was the first time I ever got grounded. It was over that. And then I got in this huge fight with my mom. For some reason, my mom wanted me to have a transistor radio. I don't know what it was. It was like a rite of passage. She wanted me to have this transistor radio. And I had $10, and I didn't want the dang transistor radio. I wanted this action that they had, like the General Lee and Bo and Duke, the action figures. And my mom was going to give me the transistor radio. And I'm like, well, if you're going to buy me something, why not buy me this? It's what I want. We had a big fight argument about that. And then she came back to the car and she said, give me your $10. And I was just like, well, I thought she was punishing me. So I gave her my $10 and she gave me the toys that I wanted. It was great. So I have to have that one. I have to put that one in there. That was one. Oh, wait a minute. I think that was a mistake for me. I think that was them chatting back and forth. All right. Okay. So on to our next. Let's do this.
Let's jump in. Barney Miller, Alice, and One Day at a Time. More comedies, but Barney Miller certainly had dramatic elements.
Well, I gotta switch the topic now. Let's go to 70s. No, we didn't do anything from the 90s, so we got to do something from the 90s. Okay. So you choose. Okay. Music, Dave. This is going to be your worst one. I know. I'm sorry. I'll let you go last, but I'll let you choose. Three. Okay. Here's the rules. 3. 1 television show, 1 band, and 1 movie. We haven't done movies at all. So.
Shall I start? Ahead.
Yes, please, Thrash Pondo.
Okay. A 90s band, I would have to pick. Actually, there's a couple good ones, but I'm going to go with Ween. I thought they were an amazing band. And
Ween?
Ween, yes. Are you familiar? Yeah.
Yeah, I know Ween.
You didn't like Ween?
They were way too weird.
Well, I think that's what I liked about them. It was all right. You know what? I'm going to change my mind.
No, go ahead. I mean, if Ween's your
No,
band,
actually, because I have a
they're
qualification.
the one that's smack dab in the middle of a situation overplayed by fools. That song.
Well, here's my question. A band that may have started in the 80s but became explosively big in the 90s, would you accept that instead?
I would accept whatever you want to give. I just can't believe that there's another person out there who knows Ween.
Oh, I'm surprised that more people don't know who Ween is. Yeah. But you're right; they were very weird. It was a new decade, new sound. I really liked Ween, but if I had to pick like my personal favorite band sound of the '90s, I'd actually have to give it to They Might Be Giants.
They Might Be Giants. Okay, all right. That's your music. That's your music.
That's my music. They Might Be Giants because I thought they really came into their own in the '90s, even though they were an '80s band. But I am glad someone else knows who Ween is. As far as television goes, I would have to go with early, though not all the way up until the end, early NYPD Blue. I have a weakness for cop shows, and I thought that was an absolute amazing cop show.
Okay.
And as far as movies go, there were so many good movies that actually came out in the 90s. But if I had to pick one, I would have to pick. I don't think I can decide on a single movie from the 90s.
Oh, give me any of them.
Anyone? Okay, I would have to say. I keep coming back to one, but I think it might have actually been 2000. I'm going to throw it there anyway. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Gladiator. Was that 99? I believe Gladiator was 99.
Could be.
And for some reason, that's what I keep coming back to. So you know what? I'm going to submit Gladiator.
And Justin Braidwood, go ahead.
Weed is from 1969.
It's not weed. It's Ween.
Ween.
Ween with an N.
Thank you for playing. We have some lovely parting gifts. My fave 90s band is Nirvana.
Nirvana, of course. Let me go. I'll go, and then I'll let you go last, Dave, because I know you're probably struggling there to even comment on this. Of course, 90s Nirvana music. Nirvana, of course, one of the best. Television the best. My favorite band of all time, Nirvana. There's some that come close, but overall favorite band, Nirvana. That band spoke to me more and more ways. Television show would have to be Friends. Friends was just the greatest television show. And as far as movies go, oh gosh, I couldn't think of a movie. I had one in my Gross Point Blank. Point Blank was an excellent.
That's a good one.
Yep. One of my favorite actor too. All right, Dave, I'm sorry to put you through this. If you really don't want to do it, you don't have to, please.
I got my list, and as a matter of fact, I'm gonna give you 200% of what you asked for. I'm gonna give you 2 on each category. I'm not gonna talk a lot about them. I'm just gonna give you the names.
All right.
Music, Green Day and Foo Fighters.
All right.
Television, Get a Life and the Adventures of Pete and Pete. And movies, Nightmare Before Christmas and Army of Darkness.
Oh yeah. Nightmare Before Christmas is definitely a classic one. I like that one quite a bit. Foo Fighters, Green Day, solid choices. I know a lot of people prefer Foo Fighters over Nirvana. I respect that. He's got his own sound. He's definitely. I definitely think though that even if Kurt Cobain had died, that Dave Grohl would have been doing his own thing. I mean, that's all there is to it. He's just too much of a giant. Too much of a. He was already making music, his first album, while they were still a band together. So. Yeah. And then the movies, what movies did you say?
A Nightmare Before Christmas and Army of Darkness, which is the third movie in the Evil Dead trilogy.
Right, right. And then there was one that I didn't recognize. It must have been the TV. Get a Life. That was hilarious.
Yeah.
Pete and
And
Pete, early Nickelodeon.
The Adventures of Pete and Pete.
I
on
don't know
Very
Nickelodeon.
that
funny
one
show about two
at
brothers,
all.
both of whom his name is Pete.
Both of them
It,
named
it was
Pete.
it was actually a surprisingly well written show for a kids show.
Well,
Um,
and if you're a fan of 90s alt music and 80s for that matter, just the number of guest stars that were on that show, including Michael Stipe, who was on that show a number of times, and Adam West and Chris Elliott and Steve Buscemi, just the list of guest stars on that show. Everybody, it was one of those shows that if you were hip, you wanted to be on this hip little kids show on Nickelodeon, and it was great.
Yeah. Well, I just saw this other corner of my eye. I got to put this up here.
Tracy Ross Myers says, I went to high school with John Cusack. He's a good friend of mine. That is too cool.
That's the most incredible thing. I mean, if there's any way that I could ever talk to him, I would be in your debt forever. He is my favorite actor. I have a video on here. I don't know if you've seen it, Tracy. Top 5 John Cusack films.
Which one was number one, Ian? Better Off Dead or One Crazy Summer?
I don't know. Well, I think number 1 was Grosse Point Blank.
Okay, but which one of those two do you prefer? Because they're by the same director. They're similar in style and tone.
That I know they are. It's almost like One Crazy Summer is part 2 of.
It almost.
I have to give it to Better Off Dead. It's just too much of a classic. But
It really is.
But I think joke for joke, I think One Crazy Summer has kind of
got it. One Crazy Summer has Bobcat Goldthwait in it.
Yeah, it does. It does have Bobcat Goldthwait in it.
And it was filmed on Cape Cod. I was actually living on the Cape at that time too.
Oh my goodness!
There's a scene in that movie where they're eating dinner at Grandma's house or lunch at Grandma's house, and you guys know what I'm talking about. The gag in that particular scene is hilarious.
Yeah, where there's spoilers on this channel, so
well, she gives them a bill at the end. Each one of them get their own bill.
Everybody's going.
Their grandma serving them.
Yeah. Are you sure you don't want a little more honey? Bill.
Plus he's named Hoops and he can't make a shot for the wife.
I know. Demi Moore's in that show too.
Yeah, she's the girlfriend.
Yeah,
they're both great shows though.
Yeah, they are really great shows. I kind of became aware of John Cusack at on Better Off Dead though, but I like both of them. They were both
also an awesome.
Oh gosh. He is seriously my favorite actor, and the fact that he does martial arts too is just like that's awesome. He learned from Benny the Jet. He's like a 6th degree black belt under Benny the Jet. And Benny the Jet Ortiz is like an undefeated kickboxer. He's awesome. He's the guy. That's the guy who in Grosse Point Blank he does the that fight with in the hall. It's so good. Oh, and then look here. Let's see. We'll go down a few comments here. Then we'll wrap things up here.
Georgia Ayers, The Breakfast Club.
Yeah, great show.
Lance Chaffin, St. Elmo's Fire.
Great show. Great movie, I should say, not show.
Cindy D, Better Off Dead, The Paperboy dying $2.
Yeah.
Which I guess is based on a real story. I guess that actually happened to the director. He was hounded by this like paperboy who thought he owed him money and was harried for the sum.
Yeah.
John Collins, I liked Runaway Jury.
I did too.
Yep, great movie, great book.
Yeah, I read the book too. Did you read the book?
I read the first few Grisham books. I grew weary of Grisham after a while, but not that he was bad, but I just didn't read them anymore after a while. But Pelican Breed,
right?
Runaway Jury, yeah, good stuff.
You grew weary of a book about a lawyer from the South.
Yeah,
it's like all of his books are about a lawyer from the South.
There's a formula, but he's a great writer. When I say I grew weary, it doesn't mean that his writing was any worse or anything. I just moved on to other things.
Right. Yeah, Runaway Jury was good, and Identity. Did you see Identity?
I didn't.
That's the one where he has a split personality.
Is this a Cusack movie you're talking
Yeah, a Cusack movie.
about? Haven't seen that one.
That was a great movie. Oh, we got some really great comments coming through here. Let's look at this last one here.
Braywarden says, I'm confused. Still don't get the John Cusack, Benny and the Jets thing.
Me neither.
It's not Benny and the Jets.
the
It's
Jets.
Benny the Jet Ortiz. He is a world famous kickboxer who actually.
You're talking about the instructor. Yeah.
Yeah, Benny
Yeah,
the Jet.
I'm sorry. Yeah, not Benny and the Jets.
Not the song by Elton John.
Yeah, that's his name was Benny the Jet Ortiz. Yes, he's a world famous kickboxer, been in a bunch of movies, and Benny the Jet Ortiz is the guy that he stabs in the neck in the hall on Grosse Point Blank. So yeah. Anyway, if you could ever hook that up, Tracy, I would be forever in your debt, as I already am, because I love all of you. Thank you so much for making this show what it is. Thank you, Dave, for gracing us with your presence this evening. It's always good to have you on.
I was excited to be able to hang out with two really awesome guys. So thanks for letting me come hang out.
Yes, Thrash Pondo. The show wouldn't be the show without you as well. You've been really good. And then without everybody in this live stream, making it what it is, writing in questions, keeping us going, keeping us on our toes. I have to apologize again if there's anything that I didn't get to. Please forgive me. The comments do, even though there's only there's 14 of us watching right now, it goes by fast. Those comments go by fast, and I'm really appreciative because it means you guys are interactive. Before you leave, please don't forget to like this video and take one of my videos and share it on your favorite social media. Please do that. Let's get me up to 1,000. By the way, just so everybody knows, this week I lost 2 subscribers. I went down to 2. I was at 218. Went down to I was at 318 and went down to 316. But then I went up to 325 over the next couple days. So I gained a bunch more back, and I'm elated for that. And I owe it to you guys because I know you guys are out sharing this. Really super appreciate it. All right, everyone, please. I mean, obviously, you guys are subscribed to these guys' channel as well, but help them grow. Share their videos as well out there on your favorite social media. Take care, guys, and we will talk again with you real soon.